Hey guys, welcome to the As the Leader Grows podcast. I am your host, Ken Joslin, where we are ridiculously passionate about helping business leaders build confidence, gain clarity, and create community. And we have got another amazing guest for you today. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe God orders our footsteps. And I was at my good friend Amberly Lago's event in North Carolina a few weeks ago, and I sat down at the speaker's dinner next to our guest, Tiffany Peterson. And we just had one of the most amazing, life-giving conversations. And I'm like, okay, this girl and I are going to be connected. Like, she literally was just like Amberly, a sister. And so, guys, Tiffany Peterson is a top mindset and sales coach, top 1% global podcast. She's even married to the best guy on the planet, which I guess that makes me second best guy on the planet. Tiffany, how are you doing? How are you doing, my friend?
I just adore you. And you all should see the grin on this man's face. We were just having a fun conversation, catching up. I love Ken's energy. And like he said, when we sat down next to each other at that dinner, just had a rich conversation that covered the map, right? Between spirit, between work, between heart, all of it. And I was like, oh, he's my kind of person.
Yeah. Hey, take a minute and tell our audience real quick, who might not be familiar with you, a little bit more about who you are, where you are, and what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So my background heavily is in sales. I spent many years in my corporate days working for some of the greats, Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and helped them in my corporate days make millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, and trained all their salespeople, mindset, sales training. I was a salesperson first, their first female to be what they call a top 10 performer ever in their company history. And the funny thing is, Ken, I was never, ever, 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 ever going to be in sales, right? I'm based here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And my big dream was I was going to school to be an educator, to be a special needs teacher. And I worked in 3 classrooms with kids with different kinds of challenges on the spectrum and learning disabilities and so forth. And I was going to be a teacher and then get married and be a stay-at-home mom and raise babies and sew Halloween costumes. I was never going to be a business girl. You kidding me? Like, that was not in the thoughts. But God, right?
That's exactly what I was about to say. But God.
But God. And by happenstance, I met someone on a double date in college whose dad had a training development business company, and I went to work for them. And then a few years later, I was working for Covey's organization, and it just changed the trajectory of my life. And I read for the very first time books like As a Man Thinketh by James Allen and Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's classic. And I literally had a transformative experience in 1 year where I quadrupled my income and changed my mind, and it changed my path. And it just was this very cool experience. And a little over 13 years ago, I left my corporate path. And so I've been doing the self-entrepreneurship gig for about 13 plus years and speak and coach on sales and mindset, self-care. I mostly coach women with a business who are growing their business, but I have some male clients as well. I've just spoken so much and so frequently in the direct sales world, which is heavily female, driven, and do all kinds of conferences. I was with JP Morgan Bank yesterday and all kinds of groups. So it's just been a unique path. But truly, when people say, how did you get on this path? I'm like, well, God, because this for me wasn't the plan, right? My plan looked very different. I've always had a teacher heart. That's what's the same heartbeat, because I always had this desire to help people. Little kids is what I thought it would be, overcome their challenges and develop their self-confidence and their skills and their tools. And that's just evolved into a different classroom.
Well, you do the same thing. Now it's just helping people in their business and the little child on the inside of them figure out how they can be successful. I posted a video. It's crazy. You talk about this, that you never thought you would be in sales, because when I look at you, I don't see sales. I just don't see sales. And I posted a video today on my Instagram page. My team did. I was on the Emily Ford's TV show. It's Emily, and I was on Emily and I are close friends. And I was on Emily's TV show and we're having a conversation. And I talked about going from ministry 1 year into mortgages the next year. And my best friend was one of the top mortgage brokers at the time in Georgia. He handed me keys to the office, keys to a car, handed me my first deal. And he goes, there's your office. Now go do it. And I made $146,000 my first year. I didn't know anything about mortgages. I didn't know what a 1003 or a 1008 or a RESPA. I didn't know anything. LTV, I knew nothing. But what I did know was I knew how to take care of people, and I knew a lot of people, and I knew how to serve families. And so really, like even that whole video today, and this is when I see you and when I hear you talk about sales, this is one of the reasons we connect, because we really do have the same DNA. You're not a transactional person. You are a very relational person. Talk about the power of everybody who's listening today who are entrepreneurs. If there's one thing you grab out of this podcast, it's the wisdom that's about to come out of this woman about the power of relationship versus just being a transactional business person.
Yeah. I love this conversation, and I love that you live it and embody it, because this is the heartbeat of business, right? Which is that this conversation is you're all in the people business. So whether you're in mortgage, you're in real estate, you're in health and wellness supplements, right? Or you're in beauty or education, whatever you're doing, for profit, nonprofit, right? I've coached many people who are running nonprofits or even pastors of churches. And it's like, how do we grow our conversion to our cause, to our this, to our that? So sales isn't always just products and services. It is that. But at the heartbeat, it's that mission of service, right? Is I want to show up and I want to add value. I want to be a value giver or a value creator, as I like to say, be a VC, right? Not just a venture capitalist, but a value creator, and that you're that kind of person. And when you see that we're all in the relationship business, and just knowing that as different as we are, right? Everyone listening, we're going to have differences of favorite foods or fashion, to political beliefs or religious beliefs, or various ways that we're different. Foundationally, we're so much the same. All humans have deep, tender needs to feel seen, to feel significant, to feel valued, to feel appreciated, right? Appreciation is the power principle at play. And when people feel appreciated, we know this, like when you feel appreciated, how do you show up as a partner, as a friend, as a sweetheart, right? As a business owner, as just a human. And so the more that we're aware, like, wait, I'm always in the people business first, real estate comes second, or whatever your industry is second, right? I'm in the people business first, and then I'm in coaching and speaking and training delivery is always secondary. It's the heartbeat, right? And I think when we hear something like this and we go, oh, that's right. But I shared something on the stage that we met on, is our mutual friend, Amber Lee, who's just a gem, who lives this as well, is one of my early speaking mentors. You know, he's NSA Hall of Fame decorated speaker. I mean, he's traveled the world. He's built a whole career, like 7-figure speaker, right?
My man, Dan Clark, is that who we're talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about our man, Dan Clark. Shout out to you, my dear friend. He taught me this early on. He was a generous mentor, took me under his wing as I was getting started. And he said, Tiff, who you are off stage is going to be 10 times more important than who you are on. And, you know, that just really resonates. And for all of you listening, whether you're formally on a stage or not, like Ken and I are regularly doing, right? We all know how to quote be on for the interview or the first date or the, courting the business. We all know how to be great courting the business, but you really are known for who you are after the sell is made, right? After the fact, off stage, how we treat people, how we show up. And when you see each human is like, they also have a very tender heart, no matter what energy they put online or how great their suit looks that they're wearing there in the business meeting. Every human is truly pretty tender when you think about it. Stephen Covey taught me that as well early on, as he said, similar, is that everyone is pretty tender at heart, no matter their outside armor.
Tiff, was it always easy? Excuse me. Was it always easy for you in business to lean into relationship, or was there ever a transition where you went from not being transactional into being relational? Or was the relationship part, is that just the way that you've always been and always leaned to?
Well, I'll say yes and no in the way that it got to grow, but yes, in the terms I've always been a lover, right? And that's just, I have a lover heart that Jesus put in my heart. Like I've always just had a tender heart. I've always been an includer. I've always been like, oh, hey, come sit with us. Like, I'm not saying I'm perfect at that, but I've always been very highly sensitive to that. And secondly, though, I would say sometimes where, I would get snagged in this is when you get highly focused on yourself. And sometimes my own nature of being at times growing up and my junior high self, which sometimes still shows up as a grown woman, my junior high self, she was highly insecure. How do I look? How do I sound? Do I fit in? Do I belong? Do I matter? And often that's the irony, is sometimes those insecurities can get in the way, where we hold back or we shrink or we wait, we're reactive and we wait to be asked or invited, or versus being the person that pays the compliment first. Is that there's times where I can still get in my own world where I'm maybe a little too self-focused, right? Versus, hey, I want to show up and add value. And every one of us can do that today, no matter what, even if you're working on a weight loss goal, or you're working on, hey, I want to be more, healthier, happier, fit, or I need to be more educated. Like you were saying, your first year in mortgage, you didn't know a whole lot about that, but you kept showing up and adding value to people. And look at the year you produced. And all of us, no matter where we're at and where our insecurity might lie or where our confidence might be at, all of us today in this moment can make that new decision again, or the renewal to the decision. I'm going to show up and add value today. And that light is magnetic, right? People are like, I want to do business with Ken because he makes me feel a certain way. Human beings, we're feeling oriented, right? And so like in sales and sales training, I regularly will teach people, people buy emotionally and they decide logically, right? They reinforce it. But emotionally, it's like how people feel in your presence is your true business card. And most importantly, how they feel isn't about how you look, right? Yes, work on your energy, work on your fitness, do those things. But how you make people feel in your presence is your true business card. And if they feel seen by you, because again, foundationally core needs is, do I feel seen, significant, valued, appreciated? If we're showing up with that, then they're going to likely be more receptive to whatever it is you're selling, because you've met the core need first, which is, I feel seen and significant to you.
It's crazy you say that. I will never forget when I first started. I was a senior pastor for about 6 or 7 years. And when I first started, we had several hundred people in our church, 2 services, and, in between like the 9:30 and the 11:15 service, like I'm like a racehorse at the Churchill Downs for the Kentucky Derby, man. I've got blinders on. I'm like so locked in and focused. And I remember I had somebody one time pull me aside after service, and they said, Pastor Ken, I said hi to you this morning and you just walked right by me. And I remember going to one of my mentors, pastor and coach Sean Lovejoy. And I talked to Sean, and this is what he told me. He said, Ken, you've got to learn to be like Jesus in that he walked slowly through the crowd. And it was about the crowd. It wasn't about, I'm on a destination, I'm going from point A to point B, but it really was about the journey and all the people that you were able to touch. Talk about, because, a lot of high performers, dude, we're like locked in. We're so laser focused on the goal, the vision, the destination. How can you, as a high performer, high achiever, how can you learn to walk slowly through the crowd and be more relational and be more sensitive to, like you just said, no matter how hard the outside, we're all human, and our hearts are usually very tender.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with me, because I felt my own energy on the inside shift, right? Where I was like, oh, because sometimes I'm in that, where it's like, we're moving, we're shaking, we got things to do. Let's go, let's get it, right? Like that fun energy that's like fire. And that just like, slowed me down. I think if we have good boundaries, and these are all practices, by the way, we get to practice this. I practice the principles I'm sharing. I don't claim to be perfected. They just are the North Star that I'm practicing. I find, Ken, when I have really clean, good boundaries with my time, or maybe say I've got my 2-hour deep work block every morning where I'm getting things created and done. Maybe that office door is then closed, and you've communicated that to your assistant or your team, like, hey, this is my deep work cave, so to speak. And you get in and you do you're moving the needle on some of your core priorities. Then I think that you can rest in the confidence that helps me feel more like I can be present, because I've honored my gold mine. I've protected my gold mine and my time. I've got those blocks of time in my schedule, whether you're an early bird or a night owl or middle of the day, is ask yourself. That's a really good productivity question that I ask my coaching clients is, when are you naturally the most on? And that's your money-making gold mine that you protect. And if you're more like, hey, cool, I'm at it first thing in the morning or afternoon or evening, then you manage distractions around that and meetings usually as best you can. And then I want to say in the very same breath, though, our work is the ministry. Right? Is that, and in your work, in your business is how we show up with people, how we nourish them. But we are going to get it wrong sometimes. I get it wrong. Absolutely. And so it's the commitment though to the practice, which is, okay, if I'm taking good care of me, my self-care matched with, I have my deep work blocks, a 2-hour, at least for me, block a day where we're nourishing deep on a project or content or creation. Then for me, it's easier, I would say, or more natural for me to be in like walk more slowly through the crowd, as you're saying. How would you answer that same question though? Because I'd love your wisdom to be shared on that too.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the first person I hired on staff that worked full time for me, her name was Patience. And I remember the first time I met with her, exactly. The first time I met with her, we were having a conversation. She goes, my name's Patience, but I'm not very.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
I had to have the same conversation with her about a month into her coming on staff full time with me at the church. And I would just say that when you realize that it really is about the people. And, my favorite Zig Ziglar quote, and I shared this at Amberley's in my talk, is when you help enough people get what they want, eventually you're going to get what you want. So I think when you realize it really is about the people that I touch and the lives that I get to connect with, and that in that it catapults me. It gives me the fulfillment. It gives me the energy. It gives me what I need in the core of who I am as a man or a woman to be able to fulfill what God's put in my heart. And I would say that would be one of the biggest ways. Crazy question, because this came up a couple minutes ago on mine. Both of us are faith-filled people. I mean, this community that I have, our core 5 starts with faith, health, relationship, business, and finances. And we've got people from all different kinds of faith. But specifically speaking to people who are Christ followers, you've been very successful financially, business-wise. What would you say to some people in that are of the same faith, that share the same faith, who have a problem thinking it's okay for them to be blessed financially?
Oh man, can we be here for like 2-3 hours? Right? Because we got to unpack
I have never asked this question ever.
I love that I'm the one that you get to ask this question to.
Well, you said when you were talking just a minute ago, it popped in my mind. I'm like, I want to unpack this. I want to unpack this question.
Yeah. Man, I remember being in my mid-20s, as I mentioned, working for Covey, and I made 6 figures for my first time. And I'm a Utah girl, right? And growing up as a woman in Utah, where our cost of living, it's changed a lot. We've had a lot of tech infusion, and now we're a pretty, very competitive market. But it was like me making 6 figures at that point in time was like probably equivalent of making about $500,000 a year, right? Just the change. And I had a lot of wanting to hide that initially, right? Hide it energetically, family, friends, and like, because so ingrained with me as I was so faith-based that it was like, the fear was, will money change me? And one of my mentors / corporate environments I worked in was for the Rich Dad, Poor Dad group, Robert Kiyosaki. And I remember something Robert would teach regularly is that he would say, more money just magnifies who you already are. Yes. It's a magnifier. And when I really got that, it was like, if you're a tithe payer, if you're generous, if you look for ways to like, I want to be a blessing and enjoy the blessings myself, that to me was a really helpful teaching, that it would just magnify possibility. And I have throughout my home a couple of ampersand and signs, right? Like the and sign. And why I have those, like I have one right here in my office. I have one in the bathroom, my master bedroom bathroom. I have one in the living room, and they're touch points, right? It's just like I have some artwork of Jesus in my home, or other things that they bring you back to representation. Well, the and sign for me represents that I can be grateful and in desire. I can be a great woman and partner and have a thriving business, for instance. Because for a lot of women, they feel like, wow, I can either have a great relationship or I can pursue my passion, or I can be a great mom, for instance, and do this. But the and possibility, right? And I think too, for me, in my own relationship with God that had expanded, I remember once reading, it's very well known, but John 10:10 is, I came to give life and to give it more abundantly. And I'm not trying to just, cheapen that, but truly when you drop into who the Lord is, like I even step out in nature, I'm looking out nature in my window right now. It's like God is a God of abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, a lot of that question you're asking has a lot to do with self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in the past, we haven't handled money as well. And we need to forgive ourselves. And there's some trust to be rebuilt, right? But it's dropping into, and that permission is, for me, I'm a big believer of pay God, pay TIF,
Mm-hmm.
pay my bills, and then what's left over can be, play or fun or so forth. That formula is pay God.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love the concept of tithing. There's a woman named Edwene Gaines. She has a book called The Four Spiritual Laws of Prosperity, and prosperity law number one is the law of the tithe. And she gives people, because we have people of all walks of faith, the
Mm-hmm.
empowerment that you can tithe where you're spiritually fed from. For some of you, that might be to a church. For some of you, that might be
Mm-hmm.
giving an extra generous tip to your waitress or waiter that gave exceptional service, or supporting a charity or a cause, or a mom or a dad that right now could use some extra financial support, right? I love my walk with God, and that he guides me to where I tithe, right? And how that can be the same or it can be different. But I'm a big believer, you pay God, and then I say pay TIF, but that would be paying yourself, right? The pay yourself first concept, then pay your bills, then pay what's left over. It can be fun or play or joy. And for me, that structure has given me a lot of trust, where it's like, I feel like I can lean into that and knowing, but it's a combination of take it to God. If again, you're a believer that's saying, I'm snagged with this, ask God to teach you.
Mm-hmm.
God will have more for you than I will in this moment, but I'm just guiding you in some of my own journey. But I definitely can, like when I first started making money, and I remember the first time I bought myself a Coach bag, I cried. Does this sound weird?
Yeah.
I remember it was like spiff dollars, and spiffs were like incentives, like extra cash bonuses in my sales environment. Right. And I remember, because what was at play was, ooh, does this mean I'm a worldly woman? Because I wanted a nice handbag. I've since gotten way over that, by the way, everyone, right? Like, but it's like, there's certain things I love to donate to, support, and I'm infusing with my resources, as well as tithing your time. That's another great resource. We talk about mentoring, but is really asking God to teach you about it. But God he delights in you. He cherishes you. He adores you. He's crazy about you. And if the things, like one of the ways is I honor God regularly, is you use your mouth with praise and your heart with praise and gratitude. It's like, I am so loving this beautiful earth. Thank you. Or this luscious meal, right? Or this beautiful outfit, or I love the vehicle I'm driving. Thank you, God. I just thank you. And it's not just about the stuff. And a lot of you, again, just need to trust yourself. That's the bigger issue, is if you're already a generous person and you look for ways to bless people with $10 a month, $1,000 a month, will be much easier, because it's just going to magnify who you are. I'm curious your very thoughts about this too, because you've never asked anyone this on your show.
No,
I'm
I
curious
haven't.
how you think or feel about this.
Yeah. We did a video on this from my team, from somewhere I spoke in the last few months. And I prefaced it with a story about being at Waffle House at like 11:30 at night. And it's a couple of years ago. It was like the week
Making really good decisions.
school was about. Actually, I was on keto, so it was eggs and bacon. So
There
that's
we
why I
go.
went to Waffle
I
House. It was
love it.
scrambled eggs. It was scrambled eggs and bacon.
See,
And
I'd be like getting those waffles and syrup. It'd be like snack
Oh.
time, but 11:30 at night, man.
Trust me, I used to do that. I just got through playing basketball with all my guys, and it's late, and I hadn't eaten, so I just wanted some protein. And I'm sitting there in a ladies. There's nobody in the whole Waffle House, and this is in Atlanta. And Waffle Houses are like every 100 yards in Atlanta. And so I'm sitting there, and there's nobody in the restaurant. And my server, and a gentleman walks in and drops off, which I assumed was her 3 kids, and they were like elementary, middle school, and like a freshman. And so I got done. I tipped her, and I tipped her well. I always tip well. One thing about people who, especially on Sunday afternoons, who profess to be Christ followers and they tip terrible.
Yeah.
I don't like that. It's a terrible representation. And so I tipped her really good. And I just asked her this question. I said, was that your husband that these your kids? And is that your husband that dropped them off? And she goes, no, my husband passed away last month. And all he left me was these three boys. And I was sitting there and God just said, and I don't have a ton of money on me normally, but I had like $240. I had all 20s. And God said, give it to her. And I just pulled it out and I just took the 20s and I put them on there. I'd already paid her and I just took the 20s and I kind of fanned them out a little bit. And I said, hey, listen, God wants you to know that he loves you. And I'm here tonight. I said, he told me to give this to you. And I'm here tonight to let you know that he loves you. And she just broke. And her three boys were in three different locations. She had them come over. Look what God did for us tonight. And she held that money up to she said, can I come around and give you a hug? And I said, if you'll let me pray for you. So she walks around the counter and she gave me a hug and she had her boys and I just prayed for all three of them. And I walked out of the restaurant. And for me, you know, as a believer, a person of faith, or even if you're not a person of faith and you have a generous, because most people have a spirit of generosity.
Totally.
They just don't have the ability to be able to be generous. So I think, number one, God wants me to be blessed, desires for me to be blessed, so that I can in turn bless other people, because I could not have done that. God could not have used me that night had I not been financially blessed. And so really that's where I think it is. I know we've only got a couple minutes because you've got a hard stop. Well, I got one more question. You do a lot of mindset training and coaching with women and business leaders. How much of our mindset, whether it be scarcity mindset, poverty mindset, how much of that keeps us from really leaning into being successful and believing that it's okay for us to be financially, not even stable, but financially blessed?
Well, it's everything, right? Is that your mind leads the show. I love to say your mind must arrive at the destination before your life does. Similar, if you're building a home from the ground up, you're going to visit that zip code and that home site multiple times in the process of creation. And you got to visit your vision, your dreams, your goals. And if someone's listening to a show like this, though, I'm making an assumption they have a growth mindset at some level, right? And how we nourish that. But all of us, it's like, how do we help ourselves have a greater sense of abundance thinking and so forth? And again, a lot of that to me comes back to trust, is trusting that, you know, as I'm growing and trusting as I'm giving, as you're talking about, right? Things are going to keep expanding. I think at the foundation of this, though, what's really on my heart is, I've mentioned already this phrase, but your ability to trust yourself is foundational to everything else you want to manifest next. And so, yes, doing the mindset work, listening to Ken's show, reading or listening to good books, and putting yourself in rooms like Ken and I have met through, you know, put yourself in rooms and environments where good things are happening and nourishing things are happening. But a lot of it is getting into alignment with integrity with yourself. You honor your word, right? If you say you're getting up at 5 a.m. to do the workout, you're not hitting snooze. You're getting your little tail out of bed and doing it, right? And that you follow through, you honor yourself, you honor your word, you honor your own commitments. That's one of the ways, again, the fastest way you build trust with someone else is you make and keep commitments. It's the same way you build trust with yourself, you make and keep commitments. And on the flip side, the fastest way you erode trust with anyone else or yourself is you make and break commitments. Now, sometimes we have to renegotiate a commitment. It's like, hey, I had this thing, or my kid was sick or broke his arm, or the water heater went out, or life will life us. Sometimes we got to renegotiate a commitment, right? Because that's human and there's grace. But it's more often than not, that's the rare, not the norm. And the norm is I make and keep commitments. And I trust myself and I allow myself, I'm nourishing, I'm doing the work, but I'm building a body of trust will help you more and more lean into. It's not the only thing, but it's a core influence to you attracting more of the abundance or the good in your life. So when we say mindset, yes, it's nourishing the mind, but how you reinforce belief is it some way what you're foundationally we're asking here is, do I trust myself? Do I honor my word? Do I follow through? With me, first and foremost, what Covey would call first a private victory and then public victory is, do I honor my word with others? Right. And people can count on me. I'm dependable, but it's like, do I trust me? Do I show up for me? Do I have my own back? do I take care of me? And that's sometimes where the self-care conversation comes in too. But it's really just moving into that reflection and that recommitment to, I make and keep commitments. I honor myself. I trust myself.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Tiff, I know we got a hard stop. What's the best way for people to contact you and find out a little bit more about what you've got going on?
Yeah, my home site is tiffanyspeaks.com. And there's lots of free downloads and trainings, and my podcast is linked there. Or you can find me on social. Instagram is Tiff Peterson. That's a fun place to connect to in lots of ways. But thank you, my friend, for having me. What I feel like so nourished from this conversation. So thank you for the space to connect to things that matter, really matter.
Yeah. Well, you're amazing, and you are a rock star, and I'm glad God connected us.
Me too.
For such a time as this. And we have some interesting conversations off air, and we'll just continue those conversations in the future.
Oh, we've just gotten started, friend. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah,
Most
some
definitely.
fun things. All right, friend, you have a great day.
Thank you so much, guys. Check her out, TiffanySpeaks.com. You can get her on Instagram at Tiff Peterson, Tiff, Tiff Peterson, Peterson. But guys, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of As a Leader Grows. As always, if this episode has added value, I'm going to ask you to do a couple things. Number one, click that subscribe, that like button. Number two, snap a screenshot of this, share it over on your Instagram, tell people about the value, share that. And then Tiff and I will also share that as well. Tiff, have a blessed day, my girl.
You too.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.